Imagine the hush that falls over Balmoral's wooded glens when the sun finally dips behind Lochnagar. The deer freeze mid-step, ravens will like living silhouettes, and the granite castle itself seems to hold its breath. That is the hour, neither day nor night, when secrets have always travelled quickest through royal corridors. On July 15 they flew, carried not by gossip-hungry footmen, but by the agitated heartbeat of a family bracing for its most intimate fracture, since the night Diana fled Kensington Palace in tears. Most people still think of that picnic as a wholesome footnote, children in smart dresses, Highland ponies grazing, King Charles holding court with a plate of Dundee cake. But insiders now call it the day of the whisper, because a single taunt snapped decades of fragile détente and forced Prince William to choose between bloodline courtesy and a father's instinctive fury. What followed was a cascade of late-night phone calls, shredded briefing papers, and one icy midnight audience that may live in Windsor lore as the moment William, not Charles, became the true fulcrum of royal authority. The quiet chess game behind Charles's sunny plan. King Charles has long fancied himself the family's gardener-in-chief, prune the dead wood, feed the promising shoots, trust the roots to steady themselves. In his mind, Balmoral would be the neutral ground where Camilla's grandchildren, relatively anonymous outside the palace, could mingle naturally with George, Charlotte and Louis. No cameras beyond a discreet long lens at the gate, no diary leaks, just laughter echoing across the D like a promise that the next century of monarchy would be free of old ghosts. What Charles underestimated was the palace's invisible chessboard. For months Camilla's advisors had floated the idea that her eldest grandson might, one day, wear an honorary pageboy sash at formal ceremonies. Not a royal rank, just a nod, they claimed, a sign that love had fully integrated two complicated branches of a modern blended family. Friends say William and Catherine remained polite yet immovable, affectionate to the child, yes. Ready to blur centuries-old lines of precedence, absolutely not. Still, the picnic went ahead, until the laugh, the sneer, the unforgivable swipe at Diana. A single sentence, an echo of pain. Eyewitnesses remember the moment as if time shattered into crystal splinters. George and Charlotte were picking teams near a lilac hedge. Camilla's grandson, older by 2 years, head full of classroom bravado, leaned in and stage whispered about King George practicing his queen walk, and how his granny couldn't cope with real castles. George stiffened, the color draining from his face, but Charlotte heard the rest. Your mum's just a model in fancy coats. Those words detonated decades of buried anguish. Charlotte's gasp drew Catherine's gaze from across the lawn. She saw her son's shoulders sag as though a world-famous surname had suddenly become a back-breaking weight. In one fluid movement, so fast a butler dropped a silver tray, Catherine reached them. She whisked George behind a bank of rhododendrons, shielding him from polite society's curious eyes. Minutes later she emerged, cheeks white, lips pressed so tightly they seemed invisible. The picnic never recovered. Aides began exchanging looks typically reserved for moments of state emergency, Protocol A11, the Queen's funeral rehearsal, that kind of gravity. Charles attempted to restart conversation by praising a tray of oatcakes. Camilla dabbed at her brow with a lace handkerchief, sensing a storm she could neither name nor quell. And William? He scanned the lawn until he found Catherine's eyes. She gave the subtlest nod. He knew everything. How a prince became a general after dark. At 9 that evening, Balmoral guests were still nibbling tablet in the drawing room when William excused himself on the thinnest pretext, a brief call to the cabinet office, he said. In truth he strode to the castle's library, closed the oak door, and summoned 3 senior councillors by secure phone. One of them later confided to a friend. His tone was calm, but the air felt electrically charged. He spoke like a field commander reading orders that end a war. William laid out 4 unbreakable edicts. No honorary titles, now or ever, for Camilla's eldest grandson. No ceremonial roles that might place him shoulder to shoulder with George. No requirement for the Wales children to attend mixed family engagements, without trained safeguarding staff present. Immediate re-education for all household members, senior or junior, on respectful references to the late Princess Diana. By midnight, those commands were drafted into a confidential memorandum, initialed WP, and dispatched by hand to Clarence's house. The king read it before sunrise. Camilla's pre-dawn plea, and Charles's impossible choice. Courtiers say Camilla confronted her husband in his study as dawn painted the Cairngorms rose gold. She insisted the grandson had merely parroted overheard chatter, that banishment from royal honors was disproportionate. Charles, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep and lingering pain from his chemotherapy, listened, then replied with a sentence that history may quote. "When a man defends his child, he needs no permission." Those words ended the debate. Charles refused to overrule William. Camilla retreated, tears corroding the composure she had spent 2 decades perfecting. The palace shockwave, and why the public cheered. The memo leaked within 48 hours, an inevitability given how many departments it touched. When Britain awakened to tabloid headlines about Prince's protective ban, the response was swift and nearly unanimous, 80+% support in Snap polls, phone-ins praising William as the father Diana would have prayed for. Even Republican columnists admitted the monarchy looked suddenly human, relatable, fallible yet fiercely protective. Social platforms filled with stories from parents whose children had faced bullying in blended families. #Line in the Heather trended worldwide. A viral video of William gently ruffling George's hair at a church service the next Sunday clocked 3 million views in hours, captioned simply, "This is why." Catherine's quiet revolution. While headlines raged, the Princess of Wales turned the hurt into policy. She convened a roundtable of child psychologists, veteran royal nannies and safeguarding officers. Out of those discussions emerged a 27-page blueprint quietly titled, The Windsor Children's Charter. It mandates supervised play zones at royal estates, compulsory empathy training for household staff, and a new code of conduct for visiting relatives, blood or in-law. The charter even introduces emergency, safe rooms, at large events where young royals can decompress away from flashing cameras or intrusive questions. Catherine also reached out privately to Camilla's daughter, Laura Lopez, mother of the offending boy. The call, described as calm but unyielding, offered compassion for the challenges of blended families yet reaffirmed that consequences would stand. A palace aide summarized Catherine's stance: forgiveness, yes. Forgetting, never. A monarchy recalibrated. What does this mean for the crown? Historians already note that William's intervention mirrors the quiet power the late Queen wielded during family crises, decisive, privately enacted, then presented to the world as fait accompli. For Charles, still in treatment, it lifts a burden. He can focus on recovery, trusting his heir to safeguard the moral arc of the dynasty. For Camilla, insiders say the episode has prompted a full retreat from lobbying on behalf of her wider family. Some functions, literacy galas, equestrian charity balls, remain hers, but the inner sanctum of constitutional ritual is now firmly sealed. Why the story resonates. Viewers in their 50s, 60s and 70s often write to us about grandchildren navigating blended households. They recognize this struggle, honoring new relatives without erasing old legacies, teaching youngsters that words have weight. William's stand echoes a universal truth. Sometimes love means guarding boundaries with iron resolve. Looking forward, the next gathering. Will the families meet again? Yes, but under vastly different rules. The Windsor Autumn House Party at Sandringham will proceed, but with seating plans as meticulously drafted as any state banquet. A discreet child therapist will be on call. George will be allowed to invite a close school friend, offering ballast of ordinary companionship. And somewhere in the background, Catherine's charter will tick silently, as revolutionary in its way as any palace decree since Magna Carta. Have you ever drawn a protective line for a child, risking awkward family politics to keep them safe? Are boundaries acts of love, or walls that stifle reconciliation? Share your thoughts below. Your experience might guide someone facing their own day of the whisper. If you believe empathy and firmness can reshape even the oldest institutions, tap like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Because whether we live in cottages or castles, the next generation is watching how we defend them, and taking notes on becoming guardians themselves.